Drive Time Confessions. In our collective, we have Brother Matthew.
Hello.
Sister Rebecca.
Yes.
Yes. And Sister Bobby is back wearing the robes of the Mother Superior. It's very nice to have you back.
A little bit bigger.
Sister Bobby from the Prior. Here we go with tonight's tale from John. Thank you for tonight's confession. You can send in yours, confessions@bbc.co.uk, dear Father Simon and the caring crew. My tale dates back some years ago to when I was going through a spell of unemployment. As if that wasn't bad enough, I was unemployed in Norfolk. To break up the monotony of this enforced leisure time, I gotta just say all views expressed are John's and not that of the BBC. To break up the monotony of this enforced leisure time, I would visit my best chum most days, and we'd pass the time watching videos, listening to music, and putting the world to rights. My chum, Olive, was married to a particularly bumptious chap who not only had a high opinion of himself, but was quite patronising to others. Most of his sentence started with, "I think you'll find." So spending an evening.
I like him already. He's my favourite already.
And he would make sure that anyone who he was talking to knew that he was a doctor and a very intelligent man within seconds of the conversation. He was the sort of guy who was always the loudest voice at a party, always had to outdo anyone he talked to with tales of travelling the world, and above all, he cut people off mid-sentence when he was bored of what they had to say. In truth, I'm not entirely sure what Olive saw in him. His name was and still is Dr. Fenneman. Clearly we've changed. We can change
Oh, really?
the name.
Oh, right, okay.
Where did you come up with that name from, then? It's quite a complex...
It is, yeah.
Maybe we forgot to change and it's actually him.
Oh,
Who knows?
Get the
I
Leo.
truly don't remember whether it was she or I that first had the idea of playing a gentle, practical joke on him, but it came to pass that two people with too much time on their hands set about having an innocent joke at Dr. Fenneman's expense. We were probably drinking a certain ginger beer, I suspect. That's how we came up with the name. Dr. Fenneman was a civilian GP practising on one of the many RAF bases that were dotted around East Anglia at the time. It was decided that his post on the base would be the focus of our humour, and we thought that it would be an absolute hoot if he believed that he was being asked to spy for a foreign power. This is a jolly good scam. So a letter was proceeded with. Mrs. Fenneman dug out all her bank statements so the dodgy foreign power could use the cover story of being an Eastern European aviation magazine and could state that, and I quote from our letter, "We took the liberty of accessing your bank accounts, Dr. Fenneman, and note that in one account you are overdrawn by a considerable sum, and I'm pleased to say we can help to resolve all your monetary problems."
Wow.
It was then a case of ploughing through Jane's fighting aircraft to come up with some juicy questions for Dr. Fenneman to receive. He was asked to photograph the reconnaissance Canberras that were based at a local airfield and told that pictures of the interior of the aforementioned aircraft were imperative. It was also requested that he should give them details of the dispositions of the RAF regiment on the base and to inform them whether the regiment had rapier batteries at their disposal.
Wow.
This is high-powered stuff.
This is
one.
great, yeah.
It was now that things started to turn rather silly.
Oh, really?
I had a chum called Lydia who was a linguist. Lydia the linguist. I gave her the letter and asked if she could rewrite it as an Eastern European whose English wasn't very good. "No problem at all," said Lydia, and she set about her job with a will, but then came up with the killer blow. She explained that she was off to work in Austria for a while, and wouldn't it be a wheeze if she posted the letter from there? And then, John adds, Harry Lime theme to be played now. OK, there we go, so I'll do that. It was a slightly hysterical Mrs. Fenneman that rang me some weeks later, explaining that the good doctor had opened the letter from Eastern Europe and had gone ashen in colour. Apparently he had just started mumbling words like, "They want me to spy. Covert. I'm going to be 007, over and over again. It was after 10 minutes of mumbling that he picked up the phone saying, "I must tell the CO. Mrs. Fenneman tried for a full half hour to convince him that he'd been had, but he didn't believe it. Right, so thank you. "Look," he shouted, "it's from Europe, for goodness sake. It's been posted in Austria. It can't be from that idiot friend of yours." And he rang the CEO straight away. It was CO, that is, not CEO. I don't think you have CEOs in charge of RAF stations. It was taken seriously, I have to tell you, for about a day before someone important with a moustache and some shiny buttons said, "Oh, don't be silly." And that was that. The idiot friend took the rap after all. So, I'd like to ask for forgiveness, not from Dr. Fenneman, who really deserved it, but from his CEO, who had to put up with this complete nonsense, and the many people who had been questions about our stupid prank, which was meant to go no further than the Fenneman household, which you might like to know now only has Mr. Fenneman in it. Yours pleadingly, John.
Or Doctor.
Yeah. Dr. Fenneman, so it's all right, though, isn't it?
Yeah. No, what I mean is, I think the suggestion is...
She'd had enough of Dr. Fenneman and his
Yes,
bunches.
I think she'd had enough of the fact that he was the patronising and the fact that he was very intelligent and cut people off at parties and that kind of thing, and went off and did better things. So anyway, what do we make of that?
Well,
and what do we
my
think,
question is,
Sister
why
Rebecca?
did she marry him in the first place if he was so annoying?
It's her own fault.
My second point is, it's a very...
Maybe he developed his annoying habits
He
later.
could have done. It's possible. It's a very odd thing, very strange joke to play on your husband, isn't it? Very elaborate. I mean...
It is very elaborate, but the idea of being... pretending to be from a dodgy foreign power and then having a letter written and, got to spy on the RAF base.
I had a terrible feeling during that confession that he was going to agree to spy and then he was going to be caught and then sent to the tower or something.
I don't think, on balance, I probably wouldn't have read that one out.
No, I guess
because
not. But
it's still a capital offence, I think.
What if he had agreed to spy? That would have been terrible. And I just thought the whole thing was very, very strange.
Well, I think the only way that I was going to get read out was if basically if the scam wasn't going to work.
Kim Philby.
That would have been a real confession. And so he started 10 years spying for East Germany.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I think that it was very funny. And John, you put Olive up to it. And so it was amusing. Therefore, you're forgiven.
Sister Bobby from the Prior.
Great. Lovely story. The thing is about Dr. Fenneman, he was so intelligent and spent most of his time telling other people how intelligent he was, but he failed to see through this.
Yes.
So, double whammy. John, you get absolutely forgiven. But I do feel a little bit sorry for, the now divorced Dr. Fenneman.
Well, you kind of think you would be taken in if they had details of your bank accounts.
Well, yeah, but since when has anyone ever been recruited for the Secret Service by a letter? Someone, we'd like you to be a spy. Please reply by turn of post to this address, the Kremlin. I love the fact that everyone was in on this. That even the friend who had not a great understanding of English and was prepared to post it from Austria. I love that. But let's be honest, Dr. Fenneman will have regaled many people with the story about how he could have been a spy at many dinner parties since then.
That's true.
So I think he's loved this. He secretly loved every minute of this. So I'm definitely going to forgive because he doesn't think there's anything to forgive either.
Here's tonight's Drive Time Confession, and you can send in yours, please. It's confessions@bbc.co.uk, or you can go online and do it all from the Drive Time pages. Sean sends in tonight's tale, Father Simon, mother superiority complex. And the other terrible too. I should say the role of Mother Superior being played all this week, ably and wonderfully, by our sister from the Priory, Bobby Pryor, who's very welcome again. My confession, Father Simon, concerns a family holiday back in the mid-1980s when I had just turned 18. Recognising this to be a landmark anniversary, Mum and Dad said that I could have a big, i.e. expensive, present. Well, I was a budding photographer and I asked for a rather nice SLR camera. My birthday arrived and Mum and Dad came up trumps. Fantastic. I was over the moon and spent many happy weekends taking arty photographs of, well, pretty much anything, really. There was only one disappointment, and that was the rather weedy pop-up flash that came with the camera. So with my birthday money, I purchased a powerful and professional flash gun to sit proudly on top. It was big and powerful and capable of turning night to day and draining the batteries in about 5 minutes flat. Forward to the summer now and our family holiday. Mum, Dad and my younger sister and brother and I jetted off to a nice beach hotel in Tenerife. You might be wondering why an 18-year-old would choose to go on the family holiday rather than party with his mates in Ibiza. Well, I was a bit of a nerd. The acne was only just abating and Dad was paying. That's the truth of it. Several days into the holiday, we were informed by the hotel staff that the main pool and terrace would be closed to hotel guests that evening because of a regional final of a Miss Spain competition which was taking place. Thank you, Brother Matt. This was a big deal. The winning girl would go on to compete on behalf of the Spanish islands and then perhaps represent Spain on the Miss World stage. Well, the evening was to be a posh, swanky affair, and the invited guests were the good and great of Tenerife society. All through the day, an army of workers laid out seating, erected the stage, tested the lighting, and moved the TV cameras into place. At about 4 o'clock, we were all ushered out of the pool. I quite like this. Come on out of the pool, there's some important people coming. And back to the hotel. They put up screens around the perimeter, and security personnel took guard at all the entrances and exits. We were shut out and could not see a thing. Fun over, we returned to our rooms to get changed for dinner, and after a tolerable meal, we loitered in the hotel foyer and watched the throng of invited guests arriving, drink chilled kava, and excitedly pass through security into the forbidden land. We could hear music and clapping and a compere talking. Well, Father Simon, we're all more than just a little curious about what was going on the other side of the fence. Security was tight and the screens prevented even a sneak peek. I saw several male guests try to get in, but to no avail. This is when I had my idea. Rushing back to our room, I got out my big camera with its very big flash on top. I put my camera bag over my shoulder and the camera around my neck and returned to the foyer. I could see a big security man ahead of me and about 20 fellow holidaymakers crowding around, trying to get a glimpse of the activities beyond. Here goes, I thought, and I lifted my camera above my head and made my way directly towards the door. The security guards, seeing my big flash, mistook me for a member of the press and pushed the crowd aside, opened the door, and I didn't look back. It turned out that I had entered the back of the arena. Before me were the rows of invited guests, and then the elevated stage with several press photographers perched in front. I took a deep breath and with as much confidence as I could muster marched up to the stage and crouched next to my fellow professionals. Soon the awful group who were playing on the stage finished and the show resumed. Bingo, it was the swimsuit round. Hello. All of a sudden, 20 ladies started parading around on the stage. Camera in hand, I started taking photographs. As I began to take in more of the heavenly scene in front of me, I realized that quite a few of the girls were no longer looking at the audience but were posing for us photographers. The clicks of the other cameras grew more rapid, and so, not to be outdone, I switched my camera to maximum speed, a whopping 5 frames per second. My flash gun kept pace, and the girls were clearly impressed, focusing their winning smiles in my direction. The photographer next to me asked me a question in Spanish. I shrugged. Inglesi, I said. He replied in English, which paper are you with then? I gulped, but it was too late now. Freelance, I said, but, you know, The Sun, Mirror, Guardian, whoever, because they always go together.
Yeah, they're always, yeah.
And The Guardian, traditionally always interested in Miss Spanish Island competition.
Coverage, yeah.
I focused ferociously, hiding my bad acting, only to hear my colleague shout in Spanish to the ladies a line that which included British press. Actually, that's not very good. How would you say it in Spanish? So
Prensa Británica.
Okay, you're trying to tell
Este es de la prensa británica.
That's what he said, and that's what he shouted at the ladies on the stage. The effect was startling. In an effort to stand out, some of the girls adopted even more creative poses to get my attention. Well, pretty soon my batteries were spent, and my knees were weak. The swimsuit round finished, and I left. And so, forgiveness needed from the beautiful contestants who no doubt believed that they were enhancing their chances of making it big over here, but were in fact posing for an extremely grateful nerd with no prospects. As a postscript, about a week later, I collected my processed film. 294 prints, and each one was blurred.
Oh.
From camera shake, no doubt. Says Sean, falling at our feet, and I'm not quite sure really what we're going to get here because he basically broke into a fashion competition. And he shouldn't have been there. What do you think, Sister Rebecca?
With his big flash gun.
Big flash gun, which had completely exhausted itself by the end of the show.
I love this story. I think this is a great story. I mean, no harm was done to anyone, apart perhaps from the egos of the girls who were posing.
They were trying
hoping to get into The Guardian.
They probably went home and said, I'm going to be in The Guardian.
In The Guardian.
But actually, the person I blame mostly for this is the security guard. Because why didn't he check his pass? For goodness sake. I mean, how lax is that? So, sure, no, good on you for having the guts to do that, and you're completely forgiven.
What do you think then, Sister Bobby?
Yeah, of course. Great story. Really good fun. However, you are forgiven, but I hope in your later years that you learnt to go the full whack. Coming out of the swimsuit round wasn't really much cost.
Should he have stayed? What comes after that?
Well, the thing is, you run out of batteries, so you could swimsuit round is not final. There's always a kind of dress final. So he didn't go the full.
How do you know
whack.
all this stuff?
Because I do actually know, but he didn't go the full whack. So I hope that he
evening
learned
wear?
a lesson. So you're forgiven, but the lesson is spare batteries.
So what's... Oh, yeah, but always in life. Very good
It's
idea.
usually day wear, swimwear, and then evening wear.
Maybe they do things different on the Spanish islands.
I doubt it.
Maybe they do. All right, it's written down in Holy Writ. You must do it in this order. What do you think, Brother Matthew?
Well, I think this is superb. This is definitely my favourite story we've done for a long time. I think if you're going to take your flash gun on holiday with you, and I'd question why you would be taking a flash gun on holiday anyway.
Because it's new and it's big
exactly,
and it's
that's the reason why. But just because you managed to get them all posing for you, and then your pictures weren't any good. Oh, unlucky. I think that's superb. What a great story.
It has been pointed out that on this day of all days, at the start of Lent, that maybe that wasn't the perfect time to mention
You're not setting a good example.
jelly babies and chocolate eggs. But I'm giving up dinner.
Oh, yes, so there you go.
That's okay.
That
One for
really
you.
isn't good
But
either.
don't try that at home, kids.
No.
It's not good dietary advice.
Yeah, we've gone down an
Sorry about
avenue
that.
again.
Here's tonight's confession, which is sort of like a day late, but was inspired by stuff that happened on the show yesterday. So, Stan, thank you very much indeed for this, which came in too, confessions@bbc.co.uk. Father Simon and the Holy Harmonious Horde. I write to ask for forgiveness for sins which were committed on Pancake Day many years ago. Like your listener yesterday, I too grew up in Norfolk, but please don't hold that against me. I just say again, these are not, in my opinion, these are the opinions of listeners. And
It's a lovely part of the
It's
world.
the most fantastic place to be. So, anyway, this is just what Stan's saying. I grew up in the 70s and 80s in a small village. My mother was the typical housewife of the time, house-proud, and a full-time domestic goddess before that phrase had even been invented, taking particular pleasure in baking pies and cakes and biscuits for her hungry family. On this particular Pancake Tuesday, I was a hungry 16-year-old returning home from school after games on a wet and cold afternoon, and like most teenage boys, by the time I arrived home, I was starving. When I walked into the kitchen through the back door on that particular Tuesday afternoon, the house was unusually quiet, as my mum was not stationed in her usual place at the ironing board with a cup of tea, listening to Diddy David Hamilton. Ah, those are the days. But I digress. Just to make sure, I yelled a chirpy, "Mum, I'm home!" Got no reply. Satisfied the coast was clear, I grabbed a knife from the drawer, went straight to the fridge and looked for what I could attack to scoff as quickly as possible. Cheese, ham, a slice of pie maybe. And that's when I saw a huge baking bowl with a plate covering it perched on the middle shelf full of batter. Before I could think what I was doing, I grabbed a large serving spoon and started slurping the raw mixture faster than you can say Betty Crocker. It was strangely chalky and in truth didn't taste that pleasant, but the illicit nature of my deeds made it taste just fine. Has anyone tasted raw batter? Is this something that people do? Horrible thought. Anyway, before I knew it, a third of the batter had gone. Suddenly I noticed the headlights shining through the window as Mum's car pulled into the drive, and I realised I needed to cover my tracks quickly. I grabbed the milk bottle, topped up the batter in the bowl, gave it a quick stir, slammed the fridge shut. Later that evening, when my dad and sister had arrived home, the usual Pancake Day routine started. Lemons and sugar and chocolate and nuts and other fillings were ready on the table, and my mother stood primed at the cooker with the frying pan and, as was normal in the late 70s, a good slab of lard. Without us really paying any attention, she heated up the pan, poured in the batter for the first pancake, and we heard the first sounds of mild frustration that had struck, and she couldn't flip it over. "Oh, well," she said breezily, "that often happens with the first one. I'll just scrape it out, we'll do another." More lard was added to the pan, more batter poured in, and the smell was starting to make our mouths water. We gathered round to do the usual tossing, eagerly anticipating the merriment of such an evening, but it started to turn sour as the pancake blackened in the bottom of the pan, stuck firm, and produced a noxious smoke. Indeed, it was stuck so firm that it couldn't be removed by my scraping, so the pan had to be soaked and cleaned out in the sink. My mother was starting to get agitated in her floral pinny. "Well, I've never had a problem with pancakes before. I wonder if the milkman delivered some off milk." Well, at this point, I suddenly realised that my tampering with the batter had completely changed the delicate nature of her prized recipe. I was about to say something when my father, who was an unreconstructed rugby-playing ex-army man, took the lead, grabbed the pan from my mother, saying, "Here, woman, let me do it. You must be doing something wrong." I stepped back and watched as he lobbed a massive lump of lard into the pan, whacked up the electric ring to full heat — this is a man cooking —
Yes, this will work.
waited until the frying pan was sizzling and poured in another ladle full of the contaminated mixture. Catching my eye, he winked at me, nodded his head in Mum's direction. "I'll sort it out," he said. The pancake in the bottom of the frying pan sizzled nicely and indeed looked a lovely golden brown, which then rapidly turned black and produced more noxious smoke as it stuck solidly to the bottom of the scalding hot pan. pan as my father made frantic flipping motions to try and loosen it, finally resorting to a good old metal scraper to scratch it away in small pieces. Needless to say, it was completely inedible. "What on earth have you done?" he said to my mother. "I've never known anyone who can't get pancakes right. Call yourself a cook," he continued, which was probably the worst insult he could have made. They didn't talk for the rest of the evening. We sat round the dinner table in silence, eating toast with lemon juice, chocolate, sugar and nuts. "Perhaps we should do this every year, Mum," I suggested helpfully, adding not entirely convincingly, "It seems a lot less hassle and tastes just as good." You'll be relieved to know my parents' marriage survived Pancake Gate, and every year on Pancake Day my mother would say at some point during the ceremony, "Remember that funny year when the pancakes all stuck?" And I would squirm in my seat and choke on the lemon filling. So the time has come, Father Simon, to beg forgiveness for stealing the batter from the fridge, for adulterating her well-crafted recipe, and for bringing undue criticism to my mother's culinary skills, for placing unnecessary pressure on my parents' marriage that night. I hope the collective will accept my confession and pardon me accordingly. Stan has never confessed to this moment that the reason why his mother was accused of being a bad cook was entirely his fault, that he consumed a third of a bowl of batter from the fridge. What a disgusting thought.
Yeah, that is the most surprising part of this tale, I think. I mean, I guess teenagers get really hungry and they don't care what they eat. I don't know. Is that what happens?
Bread would be better than
bread,
that.
Yeah,
surely.
a bit of ham or cheese,
Not
you know.
Batter?
Yeah, so that was very bizarre. But I think also very odd was the father's rudeness to the wife about her cooking.
It was the 70s.
I suppose it was the 70s. But yeah, that...
Come on, woman, I'll sort that out.
Terrible. And, you know, and I think actually...
Have you been practising that all day?
Yes.
Is that what you say?
I've done a variety of voices.
It sounds
as
like
well.
you normally say that at home.
Come on, woman. I've never known anyone who can't do pancakes.
I think Stan should have confessed at that point, because that really was, denting his poor mother's pride.
Yes.
So I think, Stan, you're not forgiven, and your dad isn't forgiven either for being so rude.
Sister Bobby.
Forgiven. Because actually you didn't suspect that outcome. Who would have done? And actually, but your dad's not forgiven. That's why I said you're forgiven. But I think you should go and give your dad a telling off. I think you should own up to your part in it. But what I'm really surprised at as well is no one said, actually, this batter's a bit thin. No one added a little bit more, I don't know, another egg to it. Yeah. It was just kind of repeat. And I also wonder, was the lard the problem, really? Is that the thing?
Lard, there's a good old word,
actually, is that really the thing that shouldn't be forgiven? So forgiven because actually, you didn't predict that kind of outcome.
And Mark Riley's not very well, so Mark, if you're listening, get well soon. Anyway, so I suspect he's probably listening to 6. Anyway, so what do you think, Brother Matthew?
Well, yeah, the dad doesn't come out of this very well,
not
does
really,
he? No. But I've got to have some sympathy with Stan, because many of the time I've got back in and just prepared to eat anything.
Not batter in a bowl.
No, not batter, but I remember once thinking very seriously about whether I could mix pilchards with kidney beans, whether that I'd had a little to drink, and I thought, this might work, this might be...
And did it?
No. And certainly the next morning, that was fun. So I'm going to say forgiven, Stan, because we've all been there.
This from Neil, and it's a sort of a romantically themed confession. Thank you for this, Neil. Dear Father Simon and the hallowed acolytes, I seek forgiveness for something that happened over 25 years ago, for which I feel guilty, ashamed, disgraced, in the wrong, and still in the doghouse. 25 years ago. My confession goes back to the days when libraries tended to be the silent repositories of books, where librarians went around with index finger to their lips, shushing everybody. Thank goodness time has moved on, and libraries are now vibrant, lively, exciting and dynamic places, and never a shush to be heard anywhere. A quarter of a century ago, there were still plaid-skirted librarians who wore their hair in buns and those horn-rimmed glasses.
I was expecting Matt to say, "Ooh, I say."
Well, I'll try it again then.
Feel appropriate, really.
There were plaid-skirted librarians who wore their hair in buns.
Yeah, well, lovely they looked as well.
And horn-rimmed glasses.
Yeah.
But there were also younger library assistants who were beautiful, vivacious, and whose hair tumbled around their slender shoulders. And one of these beautiful, vivacious young things was my wife of 5 years, who I shall refer to as Gemma. Well, you know what it's like when you've been with your partner for a few years. You start to explore new ways of doing things. And since St. Valentine's Day was approaching, I started to think about how I could spice things up a bit. What could I do to make the exchange of schmaltzy cards and flowers a tad more interesting? And I had a brilliant idea. I would send Gemma an anonymous card to the library, and she would undoubtedly become uplifted and enlivened by the thought that she had a secret admirer. So I bought 2 Valentine's cards, one that I would give to her in person, and one from her anonymous admirer. I asked my friend John to write a message in the second card along the lines of, "From one of your library customers." However, what my friend actually wrote inside the card was, "When I come to the library, I always come to you to stamp my books. You turn my pages. Can I be in your index? I wish I could tell you in person how attractive you are. I've noticed that you wear a wedding ring, but I would really like to get close to you. Find me in the Lonely Hearts column of the Town News." Now, Father Simon, if you cast your mind back 25-odd years, you will recall that the Lonely Hearts column were one of the main ways of casting your net for a mate. Our local paper, Town News, not its real name, always had a imagine what a big seller that would be. Always had a wealth of brief and almost entirely fictitious resumes of single and not-so-single people who were desperate to get together with someone new. And believe me, Father Simon, this bit of the Valentine's card message was only added to make Mr. Anonymous seem real and take Gemma off the "yet another wind-up by my husband" scent. The envelope had to have something written on it, so I asked John to address it to "the librarian with blonde hair, red fingernails and slender shoulders." It sounds corny, but it fitted in with this whole scenario of an anonymous admirer who used the library. Anyway, on Valentine's Day, I received a phone call from Gemma who said the library staff were extremely excited because of an envelope that was being passed from person to person, and Gemma was the only one that seemed to match the description. She asked if she should open it. With the benefit of hindsight, I realised that I should have owned up to the Valentine spoof there and then, but for some reason my amateur dramatics experience kicked in and I played it straight, which made Mr. Anonymous seem even more real. To add to the realism and to perpetuate the secret admirer's scenario, I popped down to the Town News office and placed a Lonely Hearts ad, which read, "Librarian, please write to me at P.O. Box 12345. In those days, responses to P.O. Box numbers had to be collected from the newspaper office, and the receptionist at Town News gave me a receipt, which would be needed for this. I'm pleased to say I never needed to collect any mail from that P.O. Box because Gemma said that, even though she was touched by the thought of a secret admirer, she was only interested in one man. So that's very nice. Several love-filled months passed until the day when Gemma found the Lonely Hearts receipt in my jacket, which was going to the dry cleaners. I explained that it was from the Valentine spoof and told the story, and was very surprised that she didn't believe a word. What didn't fit in with the story was the name of the newspaper on the receipt. Instead of Town News, it said Neighbouring Town Gazette, which was its sister paper. Apparently they'd run out of their own receipts and were waiting for fresh supplies from the printer. So, in fact, instead of accepting my story as true and proving that I was a gorgeous romantic person, Gemma ended up with her own version of events, which was essentially extramarital fun-seeking bloke using a Lonely Hearts ad in a Neighbouring Town Gazette to spread his net further afield, the two-timing treacherous tramp. Anyway, Father Simon and hallowed acolytes, for all the unnecessary excitement in the library, I need forgiveness, and all the giggling and the laughter which broke out and broke against the silence rule, for the funny looks and sideways glances that the library users received when they were suspected of being Mr. Anonymous, and for the unhappiness that Gemma experienced when she thought that I had been casting my net in the neighbouring town. It took many years to convince her of my fidelity to her. So be warned before you come up with a clever prank. It may well backfire on you, exactly as Neil's did. I think she sounds quite hard to please, this Gemma character, but anyway.
Well, I think it's a difficult one, because I know that Neil was just having a joke and everything, but it was a dangerous game he was playing, because it could have ended in tears.
What if she said yes?
What if she said yes, exactly, and gone to meet this fictitious bloke? It would have ended their relationship, presumably.
About it.
And then it also, in a way, felt like he was testing her to see whether she would,
I think you're right.
you know, say that she loved her husband really. I think that's why he did it, subconsciously. But he has already paid penance for the fact that she thought that he was cheating on her.
Many years.
Therefore, I'm going to forgive you, Neil.
Very magnanimous of you. Sister Bobby, what do you think? Yeah.
Actually, like Rebecca, it is a dangerous game and very, very silly. But the reason
isn't
why
love a dangerous game always?
Yes, it is, Simon.
So
Yes, it is. But what I was going to say was
Quite profound, I thought.
the reason why he's not going to get my forgiveness is because he set her up for disappointment. Because first of all, if she had realised it was him, she'd realise it was just him, which is disappointing when you get something and you go, oh, it's only from you. But secondly, she'd be extra disappointed that Gail Garcia Bernal hadn't sent it. That's it. She was hopeful there that she was in the library and there was someone that would come and take her to a better life, and there wasn't. There was nothing. There was nobody, just him. And
That's a very sad answer, Bobby. I feel
so it's not enough.
disappointed in love, Bobby Pryor. There, that's where.
Oh dear.
But if Gail Garcia is around, I'll send him in your direction.
He's very short, just to say.
Yes.
Maybe good looking, very short. Anyway,
Overrated.
I got to say that and admit, I've toyed with this idea myself of sending the anonymous Valentine's card to my wife. But the reason why I never did was because of consequences, and also because I've got no nerve at all. So that's why Neil's ahead of me, because I haven't got the nerve to do it.
Because she might go, well, this is good.
Yeah, this is good. Yes, yes, frankly, better options elsewhere. But it does feel a bit like, as we've said already, it feels like a bit of a honey trap. Feels like I'm going to test you and see whether you really love me. So I am going to forgive, but only because you had the nerve to do it, Neil, and I've toyed with it and never done it.
Do you think that's how Neil spoke it? I'm going to see if you really love me.
You love me.
And it turned out that she did.
She did love him.
But maybe Neil was just doing the test one test too far.